Here we go now. Here we go now.
Welcome to the second in our trilogy of webinars called FutureVigilance. This series is brought to you by Biologit and Truliant Consulting on the Truliant Talks platform. My name is Indy Alawalia, and I'm here to welcome you to this webinar on behalf of Truliant Talks. This is the second webinar, and it's called FutureVigilance 2, Artificial Intelligence Beyond the Buzz. Before I introduce the format and the guests for today, as usual, here's a quick disclaimer. The opinions expressed in this webinar are solely those of the individual guest and do not necessarily reflect the official views of Truliant Consulting, Biologit, or their own companies. We're all about fostering insightful conversations here at Truliant Talks, and we want you to know that any product, vendor, or service mentioned does not imply an endorsement. If you're seeking professional advice for specific situations, we encourage you to go to our experts. Please remember this webinar's content is meant for informational and educational purposes only. Now, with that out of the way, I just wanted to tell you we have a fantastic group of panelists that are eager to answer your questions and ensure you take away the maximum value from this session. So please write in the comments section if there are any comments, if there are any questions. If you feel shy about asking questions, just connect with me on LinkedIn or send me a DM and I'll get back to you and bring it onto the screen. Also, if you don't already follow Truliant Consulting on LinkedIn to get notifications of other webinars coming soon or links to our podcast series, Innovation and the Future of Pharmacovigilance, which is also available on all major podcast platforms. Now, today, the format is very simple. It is a panel session with a few questions that I have based off what the panel are saying. And also, we want to make this very interactive. So we want you to send in your questions. So that's for today. So now, let's introduce our panel. First up, from Amgen, we have the Director for Global Safety, Griselda Saldana. From BioNTech, we have signal management lead Sanjeev Srivastav. From UCB, we have the head of safety analysis and writing, Suzanne Foncin. From Biologit, we have the CTO and co-founder, Bruno Ohana. And finally, from Truliant Consulting, we have VP of Consulting, Abhishek Kumar. Welcome to you all, and thank you for joining today's session.
Pleasure.
Hello.
So, AI, that's a simple question to talk about, right? And I'm going to direct my first question straight at you, Bruno, because you have all the answers.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you a very, very simple question. I know you can answer it in less than a couple of minutes. What is AI? And more importantly, do you see a growing pressure in the industry and for the use of AI? And what does that actually mean?
Okay. So starting from the first one, what is AI? So AI is a group of techniques in computer science that try to emulate something that we would ordinarily perceive as the task of humans. So, for example, translating a text or executing a task with some autonomy, for example, driving a car or playing a video game, or detecting what's in an image and so on. AI has been around for a long, long time. The term is actually from the 50s. And there were lots of different techniques that were applied to different types of problems within this umbrella term. The reason we talk about AI today quite a lot is basically the confluence of three different things. The first one is research and development. There was a lot of progress in the last couple of decades on what we call machine learning and deep learning specifically. So machine learning is this group of AI techniques that basically learn patterns from data. And it's great because the world's full of data, and we can present this data to a system. The system generalizes from that and can make its own decisions without, let's say, a programmer having to write a lot of code to teach the machine. So that's really, really powerful. And on top of that, all these deep learning techniques, what they managed to accomplish was they get better with more data, which wasn't always the case. So the bigger your data sets, the better the quality of results, the better your ability to generalize. And deep learning is sort of this general term for machine learning techniques that are based on neural networks. So that's great. So a lot of research happened on this space, which made a lot of progress. Then the second factor is there's a lot of data now because of the internet, and we could use that to our advantage in terms of compiling very useful and very large-scale data sets. And then the last one is compute. Even if we had all this maybe 20, 30 years ago, it would not be feasible, or it would not be cost-effective to come up with anything that would be generally useful. But compute costs have gone down quite a bit as well. And so when you put those three things together, you get models that are really, really powerful and really, really affordable. Just to give a sense of where we are today, we talk about large language models a lot. They're basically trained on the entirety of the internet. It's a really, really big data set, which is really, really interesting. So that's AI kind of in a very small nutshell. Bringing this to the PV world, I come from technology. I've been following the PV space pretty closely for the last maybe 4 or 5 years. There is a lot of interest because, as we all know, the PV world is full of data-intensive activities. It can be case processing, it can be literature screening, which is the area that we're very close to here at Biologit. And the volume of data only grows, it never shrinks. Just to give you a sense from the literature, the estimates out there suggest a yearly growth of about 10% in the volume of literature that the research community puts out every year. So that's compounding 10% year on year, and that's without taking into account the number of new medications coming into the market or the growth on the regulatory requirement itself, which we know always grows. And so when you put all those things together, that translates into a lot of work for PV specialists. So it's an area that has a lot of data, and there's this, let's say, this intellectual effort in processing this data. We always want the intellectual efforts of specialists, of course, but there is a lot that AI can do in terms of streamlining that and removing irrelevant work and making things generally easier. So that's where the potential is.
Thanks for that, Bruno. That's fascinating. Abhishek, just to pick up on sort of the last points that Bruno was talking about some of the opportunities within PV itself. There are a lot of claims of of how you can use AI in PV, and what do you hear about those claims and specifically those particular opportunities that you can use with AI in PV?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Indy, and Bruno briefly touched upon this as well. So if you look at the current context of things, how they are, we are seeing a steady increase in number of adverse events being received by pharma companies. There is an steady increase in regulatory scrutiny, and there is a lot of focus on local regulations which are growing with time. And couple all of this with the number of sources of AEs, including social media, we can see that technology, especially artificial intelligence based technology, can bring in much needed help for the pharma companies, and get them near to their eventual goal, which is of improved speed and accuracy while also containing costs. So if we just have to talk about areas of opportunities within the AE space, we actually have to split this AE life cycle. Let's say I like to split it normally in three parts: upstream, midstream, and downstream. And upstream is an area which typically includes things like case data intake, data collection, identification of AEs from source documentation, literature surveillance that Bruno touched upon, social media surveillance. So all of this has a lot of opportunity for AI to be used in there because of the sheer size of data. Like Bruno was saying, it's very difficult, especially with the growing amount of data these days, to have to parse all of this using human resources. That's where there's a very strong opportunity of using AI. Then when we talk about the midstream of AI lifecycle, that is where we talk about case processing, which includes data entry, things like data entry, followed by quality checks, medical review, and then eventually end up it is in expedited submissions. So there is a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of work going on in the area of touchless case processing, which is a buzz phrase right now, and is also in use in some of the PU departments. Similarly, quality checks, which are currently being done either manually or quote unquote automated using some basic rule-based algorithms, that has a lot of potential to use AI. And then medical review, which is one of the most expensive areas within case processing. There's a lot of work being done in using AI for assessment of reporter causality. And then lastly, submissions. So submissions, especially expedited submissions, are essentially factored in through reg intelligence, which is coming in through regulatory obligations, which are changing at a much faster pace these days. And this is where it's very difficult, humanly difficult, to keep track of all the regulatory intelligence that is changing and the new intelligence that is coming in. And that is where AI can play a very big role, because at this stage we have solutions which can actually link to regulatory authorities' websites and look for changes in the regulations. But that is where it stops, and after that they can just alert humans to look at those changes and factor them into submissions or regulatory rules, which is something that AI can do on its own in a maybe more efficient and more accurate way. Then comes the last part is downstream, where we are seeing strong opportunities in areas like signal detection, aggregate reporting, and these areas have not been focused on so much yet. A lot of focus is only on upstream. So there is some work now being done in using generative AI to effectively manage traditionally resource-intensive activities like structured content authoring, PSMF, aggregate reporting, and also safety surveillance. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity all across.
Thanks, Abhishek. So we have three fascinating other panelists on the panel today, where you're all currently at different parts of your journey with regards to AI and how you're using it. Griselda, um, where are you on that journey, and what's real with AI that you currently use for your company? And where does AI? So we've had Abhishek talk about sort of places where it's going, processes that it could potentially replace. But what is real for you guys right now?
Yeah, great questions. So I definitely like to start with my journey at Amgen, starting with an understanding, because I know AI is such a big buzzword these days, and I'd like to always start with my journey with an understanding of first of all, rule-based logic, right, which was already in place in many safety databases, right? And so my space is what we just talked about, Abhishek just talked about, case processing, the safety database, right? So where I always like to start my journey is with when we decided to move forward with implementing RPAs, bots, right? We implemented bots to be able to do some of the rule-based case processing that our safety database couldn't support. And then from there, that was where we really got into more of AI kind of technology. We were able to implement a tool using NLP, natural language processing, to read kind of verbatim information that was being sent to us by our patient support programs. And what that technology was able to do is ultimately eliminate the intake process for us, right? So it was reading through, verbatim collection of information, pulling out events, products, that sort of thing. So we were able to basically eliminate that intake step, right? And where we're now going to kind of in the future with our future safety database is really leveraging that large language models that we were talking about earlier that Bruno described very well. How we can leverage those models to be able to even kind of go one step further of what NLP was able to do, and really efficiently pull information for elimination ultimately of the no touch processing, right? To be able to really pull through and read a case narrative and understand what are the events that are being reported, whether they're serious or not, being able to generate kind of a true case narrative that doesn't have to be manually manipulated, right? And so what we see today also is my team has been able to successfully complete in the last couple of weeks, actually, hot off the presses, a POC where we're able to also use LLM to author what we're calling initially draft PBERs. And so it's for specific sections, the safety sections around risk, that we were able to use kind of more Gen AI technology to really have a solid initial draft. So that's what we see today. And then what we can see in the future is, again, improving what we already saw with some of the NLP technologies, right? Really improving the ability to extract data for processing, to have a true touchless, scenario. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of where we're at with our technology journey with regards to AI.
I mean, that's fantastic. Congratulations to the whole Amgen team. That's absolutely incredible. Maybe to look at AI from a different angle, Sanjeev, I know BioNTech are going through maybe they're a bit more mature down their line, maybe. Although Griselda's may have changed that opinion for me. But Sanjeev, the same sort of question to you. Where are you on that journey with AI?
Uh, I will start with a very general understanding that we all know that pharmacovigilance is an evolving discipline. However, the goals to detect, assess, and understand and prevent drug-related adverse event has remained constant. So, at BioNTech, we firmly believe in sort of a not just pragmatic, but a very utilitarian approach to the integration of AI, where it can provide us a measurable result. So the two places which can be immediately used, remember, the tasks which were supposed to done in a PV environment, they have already been done. They have been. It's a common process. There are the AI process that has attached to it, which has made it efficient, is one, the workflow. A proper automated, robotic, or some other intelligent automated workflow attachment to the tasks which are already being done, such as case processing, aided with an AI. And secondly, uh, safety analytics. So, where I am at this point in biotech is trying to bring these two things together, the workflow, an automated workflow, and a single place. If I give the analogy of two types of mirror in our popular fantasy, one is the magic mirror of the Snow White, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all, and the mirror of Galadriel from Lord of Rings, which shows the past, present, and possible future, but doesn't always provide the clear answers, but gives the insight into various possibilities. We are in a process of creating a very basic dashboard in which, through automation and through workflow, at one point, at one place, we receive data from all sources, information from all sources, create knowledge graph and association graphs in the same place, and in the same dashboard, things are there to support the decision system in our own environment. So that is one of the area we are requiring. We are even reaching out to a more AI integration, not necessarily creating something new, but using the existing tools, using the existing methodology that have been already been used and very well accepted under the regulatory landscape, but to attach AI, to attach the automation, and not necessarily machine learning at this point, but attach simple intelligent automation in the workflow, that the available data in the most purest form as a single source of truth is available on a single platform for our physicians, for me, for the signal management end users to use that. So that is where we are, and we are looking for the basic initial version of that mirror, and hopefully we'll reach there.
I mean, there were some fantastic analogies there. I don't think I've ever heard the analogy with Snow White. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Suzanne, same question to you. Where are you guys with your AI journey?
I'll probably focus more on the Gen AI aspect. I think already we had bots and a lot of automation in place. But when Gen AI became all the hype, we were definitely very interested in it. And I think what was the approach used by UCB was quite interesting in the sense that they elected to identify early adopters throughout the entire company and put them together in a bit of a think tank with some AI experts and really create ideation. So we had all those people from all across the company chatting about what they thought AI could be, different use cases. And what it created was a really fantastic community of exchange of ideas. And we were able to crystallize a number of use cases for us to explore, but also to prioritize them very quickly. I believe that, I mean, AI is definitely, Gen AI is going to be a game changer in our industry, but it's important to innovate beyond current silos. So we've been, for example, focusing on literature and content authoring as many companies. But our approach is to really look at this from a holistical point of view in the company. So the idea is not to create a tool that can answer the need of literature review for ICSR and signal detection only. But what about authoring of PSUR? What about authoring of CTD modules? What about authoring of RWE sections and documentations? So we are definitely at a much earlier stage in terms of Gen AI implementation, where we've been crystallizing our ideas, but also evaluating the pitfalls. So of course, on data privacy, on the cost, how quickly this technology can become a bit obsolete. But also another angle, which I think is extremely valuable, is we've been focusing on the people. Because it is a fundamentally different approach to technology and our ways of working. And we have some individuals who are going to be very engaged and who are immediately on the Copilots and the ChatGPT of the world. But some others who had yet to engage with the technology. And I usually, to continue with the analogies, I compare it with a car. You know, you need to learn how to drive a car, but for that you don't need to know how your engine works. And it's pretty much the same. So we are really looking at upskilling throughout the entire company, upskilling people, creating buzz and engagement, demystifying. So when our use cases are finally rolled out, the entire company is ready to embrace them.
Well, thank you very much. Again, brilliant analogy. Abhishek, we've talked about some of the current successes that some of these companies are going through. But do you see any limitations? And actually, after Abhishek talks about this, maybe I can open this up. But are there risks that you're worried about? Are there things that might not work? And really, what is realistic? I mean, you know, you've set upon some things here already. Abhishek, first, like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So yeah, there are definitely certain limitations and risks, and they have largely to do with the fact that we are part of pharma industry, and pharma industry is very different from many other industries, wherein there's a lot of we have to work within a regulatory framework. There is direct impact to human lives, therefore we are subjected to more scrutiny, and there's hardly any room for making mistakes here. I mean, we can just like other AI engines which are available in the market or available openly. We cannot put a disclaimer at the bottom of our a MedWatch and send to FDA saying that, okay, hey, this data may not be entirely accurate, right? So that we don't have that kind of a liberty right now within the framework of pharmacovigilance and the larger pharma industry, and therefore there are risks and limitations that we need to work around.
Sanjeev, do you see any risks that you're worried about when it comes to some of these AI questions?
So there are primarily there are many risks, of course, but two of them which are very prominent for me. If the AI is providing less value than the already existing methods, based on financial cost, based on resources, based on the infrastructure that is required to create even a small AI efficient task. If it is not providing value and if it is not needed by regulators, companies will be hesitant to go into that. Secondly, the most important thing which I realize, which I have seen, which has become a bottleneck in adopting AI, is the data protection, validation of the data, and a very limited you use in AI. Automation can be explained. Sometimes AI and deep learning is non-explainable. And in PV, we need a very robust, explainable AI if we want anything to be passed through regulators, a higher level AI. So these two are the main areas which I think there are limits, but there is nothing that we would not be able to deal with those limits. We have to.
That's fascinating. Griselda, with your recent proof of concepts and new tools that you're using with AI, have you come across any of these limitations that Sanjeev was talking about, especially the validation part? Actually, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what validation is one component, but one thing that does strike me was the fact that we at Amgen, we've always, the approach we've taken even with our RPAs earlier on in our journey was always having the concept of human in the loop, right? Because we are so far ahead, I think, than our regulatory agencies, right? So that we don't know later, how the regulations will pan out, right? And we don't want to have the risk of having a tool in place that perhaps aren't going to meet our regulators, needs. So that's definitely one of the risks that's always on the back of my mind as we're implementing these tools and validating our POCs, making sure that within our process we always have that human in the loop, and I actually think that's going to be the case for a long time as these technologies are evolving. We can't rely on Gen AI to have a final draft of any document, right? There's always going to be the accountability of a medic or a human reviewing the content, right? As for validation, that's another struggle we have because, again, we don't have a framework to work by, right? So a lot of the validation approaches that we have so far have been very traditional. And so how can we, implement these legacy validation frameworks into this new, very dynamic, agile, fast-pacing technology space, right? That's another challenge we've had so far. And so for our NLP tool, what we've had to work with is having static models, right? So these models don't get validated very often because they were validated using our traditional framework, right? And so what we have is these models that take a while for us to update. If we see something maybe over coding, under coding, we have to wait until we have a release to test out the model updates and redeploy and implement, right? So that's definitely another challenge in this area.
That's really interesting, Griselda, because that seems to, I mean, from my point of view, the whole waiting for a release seems to go against the quickness of the technology. And maybe Suzanne, maybe you can chime in here. Like, how do you balance that sort of expectation of instant changes to, we are a very regulated industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I would actually be very curious to hear Griselda's thoughts on the topic, but it's I think there is a lot of expectations management around what can, and I think it's where the topic here is perfect. Is really beyond the buzz. How much can truly be done today? How much the regulators are ready for it, and how much also the industry is ready in terms of risk taking. So definitely we cannot move as fast, and I think that's probably quite wise because we're in an industry where we can't really afford to make mistakes. And I think there is also another type of risk we haven't spoken about, which is the how much those type of models can be tampered with no way for us to look into it, because it's not an automation that is validated with a line of code and we go back and see a line of code was modified. But if incorrect data is being fed through the model to bias set, it may be extremely difficult to also find those issues. And I think the approach Griselda was mentioning of always keeping a human in the loop will continue to be absolutely key to mitigate this. And I think this is where we need to invest now in upskilling our workforces on what those technologies can do and can't do to mitigate all those risks.
Griselda, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, on the latter, I think that definitely sparks something for me, because I think with this space, because it's moving so quickly, there is, I think, those people, like you said, Suzanne, that are very engaged and are eager to start, building and evolving. But then we still have the other set of people that are afraid of this technology and are fearful. Oh, this tool is going to take away my job, and I think that's part of the education at this point in our kind of this hinge moment where we realize that Gen AI, this technology, it's not going away. It's here to stay. Now, how do we incorporate it into our daily work, and how do we ensure that our staff is engaged and trained and aren't fearful of the changes that are coming, right? So that's definitely something that I'm constantly thinking about, because we have those kind of two sets of individuals, right? Those people that are very eager to learn and those that are afraid of the technology, right?
Bruno, do you, as a vendor, do you get a lot of these sort of questions coming from potential clients that that quite frankly, more importantly, do you get both sides? Do you have people who are maybe overly ambitious with the AI solutions out there and willing to take risks that not traditionally happen in PV? And do you have the other side as well, where it's like people just like, oh no, we can't, we just can't do that? And how do you manage both types of industry professionals?
Yeah, sure. I can give the perspective of a vendor. I think the topics that Griselda mentioned and Abhishek as well on regulatory risk is something we always hear. Will this pass an audit? Will the regulators be happy with this technology? What have you done to ensure that all this AI is compliant? It's something we put a lot of effort in. We, from the very early on, kind of double down on transparency as a way to basically, this is, we show everything we do, and we talk about our models very openly, down to the composition of the data sets and the techniques and so on. And of course, we monitor regulatory guidance very closely. And the good news is that it certainly has evolved and crystallized quite a bit in the last few years. So that there is a direction to travel, and in terms of setting expectations of what everybody should do. That there's still a lot to be decided by whoever is implementing the AI in terms of specific decisions on validation and so on. But certainly is going in the right direction. The other points about to your points on what types of users we see, in general, PV users would skew towards the conservative side of things and being as safe as possible with the technology that they adopt, which is fair enough. And everything I said about managing regulatory risk kind of addresses these type of users. And for users who are, let's say, more keen or better prepared or more enthusiastic about adopting AI, the issue of transparency also helps them, because we want to provide them with all the tools that they need, all the information that they need, make the right decisions when they're using the model. So level of supervision is something that we very clearly outline inside the platform, and there's always a human in the loop, and there are configurable ways to make the interaction of the human to the AI as light touch as it can be, without sacrificing any sort of oversight. And there's configurable levels as well, so that progressively, the level of human effort can become less and less. But all this can be justified in terms of real evidence that the system is performing the way it should. So we have both, but overall more on the conservative side, and we do spend a lot of time making sure that the system is adequate for that.
Abhishek, not all vendors are quite like that. Let's be realistic here, and your experience that you've seen with vendors. What red flags would you say are there from a and we'll go back to the rest of the panel on this as well. Have you got any red flags that you'll be like, oh, hold on, this doesn't sound right?
Yeah, so there's a saying in the stock market: if something is too good to be true, it is. So, so, so it's similar to that. Even in the world of AI, especially in PV, there are a lot of tall claims, and we have all seen in it in some form or the other, one form or the other, in the past couple of years or more than that, wherein there are a lot of claims when the sales team comes and presents their features and tools and intake solutions. But when the rubber hits the ground and when you actually see it working, there are a lot of gaps. So there's a big difference between what was presented as the solution and what is finally delivered, which is causing a lot of uneasiness and lack of confidence in the industry. I have to be very frank and honest here. And good things that people have all by now. I think a lot of people have learned lessons, and both on both the sides, both on the industry side and also on the vendor side, and things have become better. Technologies have improved. But definitely these are some of the flags, some of the red flags that have to be kept in mind whenever we are exploring new solutions, and make sure that whatever solution is being presented, there has to be some kind of a proof of concept done on your data, because that is another limitation of AI, that you cannot have the same AI data model work across all pharma companies because of the nature of the industry. And therefore the same tool has to work for your data, and it is always worth to spend some time and do a proof of concept before zeroing down on a solution.
Thanks. I don't know if any of the other panelists have anything to say on my red flag situation.
No, I would just add that. Oh,
No, go ahead, please.
no, I would just add that I definitely agree with Abhishek. I think setting clear expectations, as far as what the tool can help with, and definitely lessons learned for us have been to have measurable metrics to make sure that you're meeting those expectations, whether it means time and motion studies to ensure how much efficiency you're gaining with the tool, or other mechanism, a rating of how well a draft has been developed by Gen AI, a rating scale. Those kind of things I think are critical to ensure that you're meeting those expectations, right? So that's definitely something that it's lessons learned from at least what I've seen in my journey at Amgen.
Sanjeev, you were
Just a very, very quick two remarks. Every vendor that you will work with will come with the statement that they are regulatory compliant, their software is user-friendly, and all other things. You need to make sure that their validation process is right, and they have a training and post-implementation support. If they do not have this, most of the time that tool remains there, is not used properly, and there would always be issues year after year for their maintenance. So whenever we are dealing with vendors, please look into those areas and see that if they have a good quality management with their validation, I think you are in safe hands.
Thank you. So I've seen we've got a couple of comments in a couple of comments, a couple of questions in our comment section. So I'm going to go to them and we will ask our panel to answer them. So, up front, I see that the future is going to be AI, but I wonder whether this could lead to a significant reduction in experienced PV professionals if this traditional ways of starting in PV are reduced, e.g., case processing, making expedited reporting decisions, basic PV writing, etc. If this is the case, will it matter in our future? Griselda, let's go to you first because operations is something.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of goes back to what I had mentioned earlier, that fear that this tool is going to take your job away. But I think it's more a matter of educating colleagues that it's going to make the way you work different, right? It's not going to eliminate the need for having that human in the loop. And instead of taking the time to code a term in a case, maybe your time is spent more valuable added time is spent in assessing the case overall, right? So it's really a change in how you work day to day with the tools you have available, right? So I see more, value added work being added to colleagues in this area, right? Where the less value added work is going to be more taken on by these technologies, right? That's definitely how I see it, and how I hope that the industry can help educate people on that, right? Because even like signal, I'm sure what we're seeing now is around more predictive signal assessment, right? Being able to predict signals based on data sets that you see in psychology or in early development kind of studies, right? So that we are more prepared, right, to identify signals as opposed to being more reactive, right? And again, it goes back to understanding how the human in the loop fits into this new way of working.
Suzanne, have you got an opinion on that?
Definitely. And I completely agree with Griselda. I think, and that's why I've been so focused really on that education aspect, is I don't think it's going to reduce headcount, if we want to be brutal, but I think it's going to drastically change the way we work and the way we think. It is going to remove a lot of operational tasks. And I think it's not even going to be through like specialized tools. Just we already see that Gen AI is being rolled out in our softwares just to make things easier for us when writing and analyzing data as it is. So I think it's going to make our life easier for doing our work. And it's actually going to open a lot more opportunities in deriving new insights from data. I think at the beginning, Bruno and Abhishek were commenting on the vast amount of data we look at in safety. There is like post-marketing data, clinical trial data, literature, non-clinical, and often it's difficult to bring everything together. And now those tools will have that capabilities to start to highlight some topics. And no matter how smart we sometimes think those tools are, they are not thinking. And the thinking will never be outsourced to the machine. And this is where we will need the humans. And I would argue that this is actually the much more exciting part of the job.
Sanjeev, I feel you have a comment on that question.
Yeah, and a little different from what everyone said. I think there is a real concern. There will be de-skilling and over-reliance on AI. And the way AI is going and the way we are developing AI, it is not to match human intelligence. It is to surpass them. There would be a time very shortly when this will surpass human intelligence and no human interference might be needed in many things. So with conscious efforts, we have to balance so that it's not about losing the job. It's about replacing abacus with a calculator. Do we still need it? But do we stop teaching everyone how to remember the tables? So a balance has to be made so that de-skilling cannot be done quickly. It should be gradual. It should not be done. And for some critical task, a human interface is automatically needed, although it is not required by AI capability. We consciously make a decision to put the human interface so that our skill still remains contact, because I am perfectly in that position to say that there will be a time when, in many places, human intervention will not be needed at all. For example, FDA just approved an algorithm to detect tuberculosis, saying that a composite collaboration of multiple doctors cannot produce the same diagnosis as the algorithm does. So it has surpassed the human intelligence. And it has been approved. So soon there will be a time when algorithm will differentiate between a tubular carcinoma, a tuberculosis, a tuberculoma, and a malignant tumor, which a normal, even 5 radiologists I have consulted with, many of them would say something and the algorithm will say anything else. And I will believe that. So I think we need to make sure AI, the people who are using AI, the people who are implementing AI, to make sure to have that human intervention always there so that we are not completely de-skilled. I think it's an important concern. It's a very important question, and it should be like other ethical things. This should be kept in the back of mind while implementing everything else at this time.
I think you have a very interesting point there, Sanjeev, and I actually triggered something else in my mind when you were talking about the radiologists. I'm sure some of us have been in the room where we've had 5 or 6 medics in the room looking at a case and asking them to give their comments on that case, and you might get 10 or 12 different answers.
Yeah.
So there's a natural bias in human interactions with regards to any process. Those biases, they must somehow get implemented within the AI as well, right? Because it's based off current knowledge. I mean, I'm making an assumption here. I'm looking at Bruno specifically. I'm guessing these biases are always going to be there. And again, going back to that whole, will we be losing jobs versus do we need to reskill question? If the biases are always there, then surely there's always a need for people to be on top of the AI, and maybe a little bit less of, the whole Sanjeev's a very good example there of just letting it go and run on itself.
Yeah, that is a great point. It comes back to the fact that everything around machine learning is centered on the data. So the quality of the data matters quite a bit. And to me, this is where an area where pharmacovigilance experts would play a huge role. In our world, that's how we do it. From curating the data to quality checking it to annotating it and then finally testing model results. Everything is done together with pharmacovigilance specialists. And without them, who knows what the quality of the model will be. They are ultimately the specialists that would assert that the model is doing what PV specialists should be doing. And it's also a very useful way to prevent the sort of biases that would, let's say, lower the quality of the results. And having this level of oversight during the development life cycle is also very important.
Thanks for that, Bruno. I'm just going to go to another question from. I would also be interested on the broader team's view as to regulatory readiness. Has anyone experienced a regulatory audit or inspection, and what was the experience? Has anyone had an audit with their AI solution? No.
Not yet.
No. Sanjeev, no.
So
Sorry, Bruno.
No, no. Unless uh, uh, your methodology includes AI, and here I am clearly stating if an algorithm is being used to justify something, the regulatory authorities will ask for the algorithm explanation. And for example, if you are in one place which I have seen, I was not a part, but I have known that we are calculating predictive positive value for any drug event combination. In order to use that Bayesian algorithm, what was the confusion matrix that was created? That was audited to see that if it is an approved methodology or not. So that is what is done. But generally, when we are using automation, not exactly a machine learning platform, then there is no audit on that.
Indeed, and I think I would be very interested, to hear your thoughts, Griselda, on like as a part of proof of concept. I'm sure it has been a priority to be ready for questions from inspectors or internal auditors, and probably having to build the plane as you're flying it. And of course, we know that in Europe we're having some regulations that are coming, and hopefully some further clarity coming soon. If you can share, what was your approach? I would be super curious.
Yeah, no, so that's a great question. And as I mentioned earlier, we are using traditional validation processes to implement these tools. So, if we are asked, or when we are asked in an inspection about it being able to explain how the tool has been validated, that is how we can address those comments, right? With regards to the POC on the drafting, that's just internal. Obviously, we haven't implemented in production yet, so those are still questions to be answered, and what the approach is going to be on how we are going to be validating the Gen AI tool and how it's drafting the report itself. So more to come there for sure.
We've been also considering the impact of having a GXP validation or not, because we all know how costly a GXP validation can be, and again, then the importance of the human in the loop, etc. Definitely a very interesting topic.
Yeah, well, one thing I could mention from the vendor side is we are frequently audited by our clients. The topic of AI does come up quite regularly, and possibly more frequently in recent years. So it's something that we need to supply the entire life cycle and be able to justify its performance metrics around the models and our validation strategy. These are things that tend to get asked on those occasions. We also have been, we're not directly inspected by regulatory authorities, but indirectly through our customers. These already happened as well, and the type of conversation centers around what does your model do, and how is it built, right? In other words, what's your development lifecycle and validation strategy?
And have you gone to a level of GXP type validation or not yet?
Yes. So the literature platform is there to perform a GXP activity. So yeah, all these documentation artifacts are there to meet GXP compliance as well.
Thanks. I've got a couple more questions. Hopefully we can fit them in. One here, what do you think are the key steps that should go into a pre-deployment checklist? Again, I'm assuming this is AI. Anyone want to answer that? Abhishek?
I think a pre-deployment checklist for AI solution would be very much similar to what you would have for any other solution in place, except for the fact that going back to the previous point that was being discussed about regulatory audits and validation of AI models, the onus lies entirely on the MAH, unfortunately, right now, that the regulators have made that very clear. partly because they themselves they are catching up right now with the technology. They are trying to train themselves on AI and machine learning and all the new age technology, and partly because there is not enough penetration of these new age technologies in pharma world. But coming back to this question, it will be very similar, but with a higher focus on ensuring that validation is robust, because the onus is more and there's more at stake for the companies when there's an inspection.
Thanks, Abhishek. And we're coming to the end. I think I want to specifically point this again to our three farmer colleagues here. How did the business identify what pieces of the process or the activities should use AI? Suzanne?
That's a very interesting question. So I think it will very much depend on how the business is structured and its technology ambition. I think for us, we started with very much ideation hands-on. Okay, we all get ChatGPT. What does it look like? I'm a believer that the people who develop their technologies are not the one who will know how to use it in what we do. It will be the experts. And that's why by us trying to explore a bit what the technology can do and can't do, then this is where all those use cases are coming. Once we had our use cases, we, of course, started to see where we could aggregate them. So I mentioned this at the beginning to make sure we don't have a tool specifically for safety, but maybe also for clinical writing, etc. Because then comes the question of ROI. I think we need to realize that those technologies are extremely expensive to develop. There isn't a lot of resource available. We are all competing for the same resource, and that's where partnering with a vendor becomes extremely important often. But also there is a potential for those technologies to become out of date very quickly. So I would advise to definitely think broadly, but also to think about where you can have a quick return on investment and maybe not to look at a 10-year timeline.
Sanjeev, how did your business identify?
So two simple things: identification, person-time combination, a combination of how many people and what much time, a total. If it can be reduced by using an automation process or robotic process, that is the first place we should do. Secondly, some things which are so prone to human mistake because of the bulk of it, like literature, that is the place where you have to use AI in the first place. Now there's a whole new world where you can use AI in many places, but if you use these two things where it is most prone to human mistake and where it can reduce the person time for your organization, you should try to use the AI, whether it is an AI or an automation or a robotic process, use it there.
And finally, Griselda, same question.
All right. Yeah, no, for us, I think the way we were able to prioritize kind of the use cases is the way we tackled it is feasibility, right? What technologies are out there and how feasible are they to implement? What is the maturity of it, right? And then from there, we went and with the ROI, because obviously, as we mentioned before, these are very expensive tools, right? That are changing very quickly, and so where would our ROI be greatest fit, right? So that was definitely how we evaluated kind of our ideations that have come up in our organization for sure.
So with that end of that question, Griselda, thank you very much. To all the panelists, thank you for joining me today for our second webinar in partnership with biologit, FutureVigilance. Griselda, thank you. Sanjeev, Suzanne, Bruno, Abhishek, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, I'm just going to do one quick cheeky plug. We do have our Truliant Safety Summit, which is a vendor-free virtual conference. It's a 5-day event. Each one of the tracks is a singular webinar, which is held on every single day. Like I said, it is vendor free, so it's pure discussion with PV professionals, and you can see on our LinkedIn channel all the details for that. So that was a bit of a cheeky plug. I shouldn't have really done that, but who cares? So thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of the week. Thanks.